So, as we're talking about here, the real world have all these kinds of issues out there. When a sales guy closes a deal with a client, you get called to deliver. What does that look like? So do you get an email that says, okay, all yours? What's the process look like?
Those are the less positive ones. I think what we try to do is I encourage my sales force to get involved with the process, or for us to get involved with the process almost during the sales process, because first of all we can bring a lot of credibility in terms of being able to talk about what we've done for other people and create some comfort that this isn't a new area for us. So that, and equally it gives us an opportunity to do some discovery around, what is it that this client is trying to do. And start to, steer the thinking around, best practice and what we would recommend almost before the paperwork gets signed off. So that by the time we get into the process, we're sort of a bit further along in terms of our level of understanding. What it sort of looks like immediately post-sale, if you like, is we would then typically conduct a series of workshops with the client to understand what it is they're trying to do. And if I'm honest, very often they're not absolutely sure themselves. They're looking for us as kind of thought leaders in this space to provide them with some suggestions.
So they know they have a problem. They signed a contract to solve it. But they really don't know how that's going to be solved.
No, absolutely. And part of the service they perceive that they're buying, quite rightly, is tell us what you've seen elsewhere, what you think works well, where some of the pitfalls might be that we should avoid, etc. So they all have a vision that they want to improve productivity and these various improve customer satisfaction, get extra jobs per day done. But what does that actually look like in terms of real bits and bytes in terms of programming is often not as clear.
So what kind of data are you trying to get out of these workshops that will help you guys deliver on
So what we try to do is walk them through a business process and understand what it is that they are looking to achieve in terms of, obviously they're making a change to the way their business is going to operate. Implementing a system like ours is very much a sea change in terms of the way a field workforce would operate. Because all of a sudden you've got guys out in the field with devices capturing data, where traditionally perhaps they'd go out in a van in the morning and that would be the last you'd see of them, and they'd come back with a set of paperwork to say they'd finished X. Now all of a sudden you have this opportunity to, feed work to them on a piecemeal basis through the day, make changes to who's doing what based on the intelligence that's coming back, etc., etc. So there's an awful lot of opportunity to and even starting to think about it in those terms is often challenging. So what we'll do is we'll take a particular set of workflows for a given business unit. So what would happen in a certain set of circumstances, and then walk through what it is that they want the system to do for them, and equally what data they want to capture. And this is where the kind of mobility stuff comes in. And it's become a lot more complex as the technology has evolved. So if I think back to the first mobile project I was involved in probably 5 years ago, it was really just about collecting task data. But as the understanding has grown that all of a sudden we have guys out in the field with this set of tools, suddenly we can create some productivity gains in terms of data capture. So the very early forms of that were very simple sort of drop-down fields and data validation. But these days, we've just created a solution for a water utility where we can actually do quotations for delivering whole new bits of infrastructure out in the field based on the diameter of the pipes that they want to do, and adding VAT. There's an awful lot of complexity that you can build into it. So that instead of some guy going out and visiting a site and then coming back and creating a quote and sending it out and getting approval, he's literally now pressing a few buttons in the field. Literally a field because the housing estate hasn't been built yet. Delivering it to the customer, getting a signature, and it's then a case of it can be processed and sent out. So
So when you sit down with these guys, and you've done a lot of these mobile projects so far, you must have seen kind of as you talked about best practices. You've seen a lot of challenges out there, and a lot of problems you've learned from. What are some of those big challenges a company should be thinking about and considering and avoiding?
Okay, so one of the things we often see is a sort of over-ambition, if I can call it that, in terms of data capture. It's good that an organisation wants to capture data and create more business intelligence about its infrastructure and its workforce. But you can go to a logical extreme with this and get to the stage where you've got guys out in the field that are spending ages capturing data, pressing buttons. So
instead of delivering services,
exactly. So you have to kind of temper the enthusiasm in terms of what is a reasonable user experience for the engineer in terms of what you're asking them to do. We have to remember that some of the workforces that we're talking about, and it does vary by industry to be fair, but you can often be talking about guys that have never really been computer literate or never needed to be for the work that they're doing. Your sort of classical utility paradigm of a guy with a shovel. It's a bit different in a telco environment, but the principle applies. So what we try to do is sort of work around the kinds of things that make sense in terms of what that user is going to have to expect and the change management challenges that the organisation is going to face. So keeping it realistic in terms of not expecting them to fill in thousands and thousands of forms is a way forward.
Got it. Any other challenges you want to highlight?
We often talk about connectivity with customers to try and make sure that the sort of challenges around this are understood. So bearing in mind that, all the applications that we deliver are designed so that they can work offline, bearing in mind that, you might be potentially in a rural area without a signal for a while.
Right.
But obviously, the perfect situation is to be fully connected so that the real-time information really is real-time.
Right. Just in the last few months, actually, I've done some projects in Australia.
Right.
And you get away from the coast, connectivity is a huge issue, right? And I've also been on site in Scotland, where it's the same thing. Yeah. It doesn't take much where you're disconnected.
Absolutely.
And I also hear that here in the UK, there's quite a lot of problems with that as well.
Absolutely. So we've done projects as well in places like, say, the Lake District as a good example, or Scotland, where you're in a remote rural area, or you're in a multi-storey car park, for example, and the signal's just not there. So what tends to happen is that the data is not necessarily feeding back to the back-end system and updating statuses, triggering the release of future jobs, etc., etc. And one of the things we've been doing is working with organisations like NetMotion and BirdStep to try and improve the experience for customers around this. So we've recently worked on a utilities project with one of those organisations to try and address this point in order to make the experience better.
So let me just add some personal experience.
Sure.
I doubted the value of those guys for a long time. But after talking to all these big utility companies and working with them, they're all telling me there's big value in working with them. What's your opinion?
I completely agree. Just from the point of view of keeping that real-time data real-time, and also from a user experience point of view, you can imagine there's nothing more frustrating, even in a sort of consumer personal life, than trying to get a signal in a field and not being able to.
So that's a lesson I've learned recently, is that people are telling me there really is value, and these are people that work in the field with that as well. Yeah. So you have the same experience.
Absolutely. From a change management point of view, it makes a huge difference because it's a reason not to adopt the technology, if you like. I can't get a signal, I work in a rural area, etc. So, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it certainly makes the experience better.
Perfect.
Well, one of the other things that we've also discovered is that we work with a construction company that came to us with the idea that they were going to deploy iPhones to the engineers to actually do the data capture in the field. And at first we thought it was a sort of odd choice for a construction or utility company, because you can expect that they're going to get dropped and broken.
Right.
And the way that they explained their thinking to us around this was to say, actually, we're giving them this as a kind of sweetener to say, look, we can give you a really nice device as a result of deploying this technology. So it was kind of a change management enabler from that point of view. So they were entitled to sort of do things like download personal apps onto these devices as long as they looked after them, basically. So yes, they got a few broken ones along the way, as you'd expect. And anyone who's ever owned an iPhone will know that if you drop it, it tends to break quite easily.
Right.
But the net result was that they were using the technology almost to sell itself, in a sense, because they recognised the trend in the market from a consumer point of view, and were trying to adopt that sort of buying, with the engineers.
Well, Alec, I want to thank you for sharing with us. This is real-world information that's hard to get from other sources. So you opening up and sharing what you see from your real world perspective is, I think, going to be a huge value to the listeners. So I want to thank you very much for sharing.
Thanks very much for your time. Thanks, Kevin.